Hey everyone, it's Carl. Now you are creating your new epic campaign with all sorts of cool ideas, and all you're waiting for now is for the players to give you some backstory that you can now weave in what they're interested in and what they're looking to have experienced and character growth, all that kind of stuff. But then you get that one player who has no backstory.
There's a glint in the DM's eye. It's time to save a die. Save a die.
Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We'd really loved your support and visiting the site and all that good stuff. Give us feedback, add some comments, all that good stuff. We also now have a new podcast called Mastering the RPG, which is more general, but hey, we'd love you to listen to that too. So what do I want to talk about? Well, backstories are important, right? As a game master, you're always weaving in things that happen in the player's past that could affect their future, or items that they've defined that drive what they want to see in the story going forward, because that's the character arc they're trying to do. But what if a player really doesn't have much of a backstory, or their backstory kind of doesn't really give you anywhere to go with? Well, the players are already telling you what they want to do without telling you what they want to do. Or that meme. Tell me what you want without telling me what you want. And it's right there on the character sheet. And so this is a chance to have a dialogue with your players. So you start off with, obviously the big one is hindrances, right? Hindrances define the quirks or the interesting things about the character. So if you have a character who has, I don't know, something like a particular quirk or a phobia, where did that come from? That's not something that just sort of pops up. It's a chance to sit down with that player and say, well, now you're afraid of X, or you have this weird quirk or tick or something. Where did that come from? Maybe it's not just the way they were born. Maybe it's something that's driven by the fact that something in their past has happened, and now we can start building that out. And they want to be able to play that hindrance up because they want the bennies from it. Well, at least you hope, right? And so that's a chance to say, well, that phobia came from here, and maybe at some point in the future we can now return to that kind of backstory thing that defined and drive a new story point that uses that hindrance and makes the character interesting. You'll see that a lot. There's things like impulsive, there's driven, there's a lot of hindrances that are probably based on something that's happened in the person's past. Like, why are they impulsive? Maybe they're born with it, sure. But I think of like that show Hoarders on television, where it's something in their past kind of triggered this behavior where now they decided they're going to save stuff forever and never get rid of it. Well, maybe there's something like that in the player's past in a conversation that drives them to now jump in without looking. Maybe there was something they missed out on. Maybe they didn't invest in Bitcoin early enough. And so now they're just going to jump into everything right away. And that's why they're impulsive. You can also see things like Death Wish, for example, which is the player wants to die in some climactic, incredible way. Why? What is driving them to do that? And maybe that's something from their past. So not all hindrances need a backstory to drive it, but things and often will. And, players define these hindrances so that they can get points, so they can play them later. But obviously they need something to kind of drive some of them, like secret and wanted. If you don't have a backstory, where do those things come from? So I think it's really up to the game master, if you want to work with that player and have something that makes it interesting as they go through their character's arc in the story, to sit down and say, well, let's talk about those hindrances and what are they doing, or where do they come from? Maybe you just didn't want to put them down because you're afraid I'm going to mess with you. But the reality is they come from somewhere. They're defined into your character, and that place they came from maybe can be brought forward into the story and make something interesting, right? Obviously, there's other things too. Don't forget about skills. The skills really define what the player wants to play. So if the player has academics and they put a lot of points in it, chances are they want to do something that's related to that liberal arts degree or whatever it is that they have. Research, same thing. They are hoping that there's a way to use that to dig into the archives or something to do something interesting. It's not always, and if you don't do that and recognize that the players want that, you're going to end up with players over time who just have things like notice, shooting, fighting, repair, healing, kind of the basic stuff, but they're not going to spend time getting interesting skills because you're not using them as part of their gameplay and letting them shine. Now, how's that relate to backstory? Same thing. Where do these skills come from? So you're like, so you have that super academics skill, high, and you know everything there is to know about French literature or whatever it is. Why is that? What's the reason? You know, where does that backstory come from? Maybe your father, let's go back and say, well, maybe your father was actually a professor and taught you some things, and that now leads you to want to follow in their footsteps and drive into these and understanding. Even things like, I got a high gambling skill. Is it because I just like the gambling, or was was somebody in my past taught me how to hustle, and that person's going to come back and now maybe try to hustle me? Those skills come from someplace, right? I mean, the character doesn't pop out of thin air, and those skills come from training. They come from their life history, whatever. And so now you have another way to sit with a player and understand where their backstory would fall into with these skills. So that really drives it, right? A player who doesn't have a background really does have a background. Their hindrances define who they are, and a lot of the hindrances have to come from someplace, or could come from someplace, because it's a defining characteristic of the player character, and those usually don't just pop out of thin air. Same thing with skills. Players telling you what they want to do in the adventures, and that what they want to do may come from their history, parental figure, somebody who was a mentor, whatever that helped drive those skills. So kind of intuitive, but I was just kind of thinking about it because my campaign that I'm doing now is probably actually a couple months away from finishing, but I want to start thinking about the next one. And so these ideas pop in my head, and I thought I'd share them. So anyway, Carl again with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Would really love your support. And catch Mastering the RPG, the new podcast, and hopefully you like that too. Thanks much.
There's a glint in the DM's eye. It's time to save a die. Save a die. Save a die.